Thanks, Shahana, and I might say up front that we're really delighted to support Bioenergy Australia. They're doing a great job, and I believe that the conference so far has been really good, interesting, engaging, and thought-provoking. So well done to all. That's been really good. What I might do is just a quick acknowledgement to country. We do acknowledge the traditional owners and the custodians of the land upon which we live and operate, and we pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Just a very quick introduction on AGIG. We're Australian Gas Infrastructure Group. We are one of the largest gas infrastructure business in Australia. We have two distinct businesses. On the East Coast, we have several gas distribution businesses. In Victoria, 2 out of the 3 gas distribution businesses are owned by us. We have the entire gas distribution business in South Australia. We have gas distribution networks in regional New South Wales, and a significant gas distribution business in Brisbane and the regional towns of Queensland. In total, about 2.2 million customers are connected to our network. That's on the East Coast. On the West Coast, we are primarily a gas transportation business. So we do own and operate the Dampier to Bunbury gas transmission pipeline. We also have significant gas storages in Western Australia. So a gas infrastructure business, both East Coast and West Coast. Now, we are committed to a low-carbon future. We have a low-carbon vision, and that vision really is supported by some strong short-term, medium-term, and longer-term targets. I might emphasize that our short-term target is to have 10% renewable gases being injected into our network on the East Coast by 2030. And I might remind some of my team members are here that 2030 is not too far away. But that's our commitment, that's what we're focused on. In the longer term, we are committing to transitioning our distribution business to net zero by 2050, but we will start some serious decarbonization by 2040. In delivering the vision, we do have a strategy, a plan, and projects, but really what we're trying to do requires supportive policy, a positive regulatory environment, requires us to engage very effectively with key stakeholders, with communities, with regulators, with industry, and of course at the end we have to deliver projects. So that's how we look at the world, and we are focused on all the 4 areas which I've just mentioned. Now, as I said, we are very focused on achieving our 2030 target, 10% renewable gases into our network by 2030. So renewable gases is both renewable hydrogen and biomethane. And we have delivered some really exciting projects on hydrogen. We're on our way on renewable hydrogen, but we are very, very focused on biomethane as well. It's an absolute focus of the business. We have several projects which are under advanced feasibility. We haven't taken FID yet, but hopefully this year is a year of FID for AGIG on biomethane. So a really important sector for us to meet our targets, both medium-term and longer-term targets. And with that, I think we've got some great speakers to talk about biomethane and the domestic deployment of biomethane at scale. And first, I'd like to invite Stephanie Salinas from Yarra Valley Water. And of course, we all know Yarra Valley Water are doing great things in biomethane and waste management. So, Steph, over to you.
All right. Okay, so first off, I'd also like to start by acknowledging our traditional owners. For Yarra Valley Water, that's predominantly the Wurundjeri people in the Melbourne area. Here in Canberra, that is the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people of Canberra. So I do like to travel and extend my knowledge of traditional owners. So start with that. So Yarra Valley Water. We are one of the largest of 3 water corporations covering the north and east region of Melbourne. Our catchment extends about 4,000 kilometres and includes about 20,000 kilometres of water and sewer pipeline. We have roughly about $6 billion worth of assets. We service 2 million people, 30% of the state's population, for their water and sewer services. This also includes about 60,000 commercial customers. So why am I here? In the period of the Millennium Drought, there was an extreme economic and environmental pressure that was felt by many areas of government, including water and sanitation services. During this time, we were forced to really think innovatively about reducing our costs, reducing our impact, and ensuring water security throughout the drought and for any future droughts that will most likely come to pass again. In this journey, we did a bit of a deep dive on where it was best or most opportunity existed to reduce cost, provide longevity of our assets into the future. Power consumption was quickly identified as one of our largest areas of impact and risk. Running the sewer network, a variety of treatment plants, recycled water plants, the opportunity was very obvious once we started looking. The concept of bioenergy came primarily from our connection with our international peers, looking over to Europe, UK and the Americas. Everybody seemed to be doing it except for us. We partnered with a couple of utilities over in the UK, namely, I will say Scottish Water Horizon, because they were a huge support to us in our journey through learnings and their experience. And we started looking at whether bioenergy was something that was going to be feasible for us. You'll be aware of other projects around the place doing biosolids into AD, which is sort of where we started our journey. As it matured into what would work for us and our catchment area, we actually ended up making the decision to do food waste only AD, located next to one of our treatment plants. So often we are confused in being a biosolids AD facility, but nope, just purely food. So that was sort of our driver to deliver the first asset. So that's the one on the left, which is our Wollert facility. I'll come to our second facility shortly. So during this time, those are our primary objectives. That was what we were working towards. Probably a little ahead of our time without even realising it. It was organics diversion to landfill. It was bioenergy targets and all of this sort of stuff that we have today. But during our journey, we also had a obligation delivered to us by the Water Minister, which was that all water corporations in Victoria need to be net zero by 2030. Our ambitious MD decided that we would do it by 2025. And so Waste to Energy 1 was born. Whilst we have been in operation of Waste to Energy 1 and the Minister's obligation came to fruition, it was a pretty easy jump for us then to reassess the opportunity for how we were going to meet the rest of our obligation. We weren't quite there yet. And we landed on a range of solar projects and a second AD. It just made sense for us to continue in that line. So we led a consolidated solar project. So we're part of all Melbourne, all of the water corporations in Victoria as part of that obligation came together and they collaboratively delivered a solar facility, which is part of our offset. We then further added to that by putting solar over all of our car parks at our Mitcham office, and together with the delivery of our second facility, we will be net zero by 6 months late, I think it's going to be, but yeah, 2026 we will reach our target. So Wollert on the left is a 30,000 tonne food organics processing facility. We've got two 520 megawatt CHP engines on that site, and we delivered that with our construction and operation partners, which were a consortium of Aquatech Maxcon and Welltec Biopower from Germany. It was commissioned in 2006 and has been operating since. Lilydale will be a 50,000 tonne capacity plant. We'll have two 1.2 megawatt CHPs at that facility, and it will commission in 2025. Construction is currently underway, having secured our works approval and planning permits in December of last year. I'll call out, we also received $1 million of grant funding from Sustainability Victoria's Bioenergy Fund for that project. An overview of our model, just to give some context, very high level. You can ask me questions after. I'm here to talk about digestate. But our feedstock, as I mentioned, is organic food waste. It's delivered to us at the gate, and we charge a gate fee to our customers for that material. That's our revenue stream number one. We then capture the biogas, use that to fuel CHPs. That yields LGCs and ACCUs, which are revenue stream number two. Excess power generated at the assets is then exported to the grid. That's revenue stream number three. Along with that, our business case includes things like behind-the-meter savings for Yarra Valley Water. The decision to progress, I thought it was important to mention, the decision to progress Lilydale with CHPs and not biomethane was for risk reduction. A lot of people ask that question. At this current time, and at the time that we were seeking our approvals and financial approvals, it was the safest pathway to choose to ensure we could keep moving forward. We do keep track of the likelihood that we will shift to a biomethane production in the future for both of our assets. Digestate at Wollert, as you can see, conveniently located next to our Aurora sewage treatment plant. We unfortunately dilute and discharge the digestate into the sewer system. It travels down the stream, and I have a very small comfort in knowing it makes its way to Melbourne Water's larger AD facility for a second round of gas production before being further treated, and then the residuals ending up in our bay, which is extremely, extremely frustrating. At Lilydale, there's no sewage treatment plant located right next to it. There's one nearby, but not close enough. So we will not be doing that. We will be doing some high-level processing, and the digestate will be reused off-site. So, digestate. This is a slide from the Victorian EPA regulation consultation periods for digestate. I'll make a caveat, I do not speak for EPA, but I thought it was important to share where things are at in Victoria. I think we tried and couldn't get someone here, so I'll do the honours. The challenge for digestate in Victoria, and I understand very similarly for a lot of states around Australia, is that it is considered a residue of waste to energy. That means that it is it previously was, a reportable priority waste. That means you need permission to handle it, to transport it, and it needs to go to a lawful place for processing. Similarly, in characteristics to things like fly ash or clinker dust. So, not quite the right profile, but we ended up in that group just through a technicality, an update in the regulation that was overseen by everyone that used the umbrella term of any residue from waste to energy. So we got included in that, and that's where we were at. So this inhibits agricultural uptake, quite obviously, as farmers would need to get permission previously to apply reportable priority waste to their land. The reputational risks for any farmer to have any paperwork that says that they're applying a reportable priority risk straight up just would prevent any discussion from going forward, regardless of being able to present the information that demonstrate that the risk profile was low and that the benefits were high. So that was the biggest challenge we sort of had in Victoria. It created a risk perception of digestate, which further exacerbated any market development that could be done in that space. But let's not dwell on the past. We have some new regulation now. I don't blame you if you can't make sense of that. A lot of people are still struggling with it. But essentially what we have is a two-stage regulation. Stage one includes a designation. So if you can meet the requirements that are specified in the designation, it will remove the barriers of the permissions required to handle and process digestate, and it will remove the permissions required to transport digestate to another facility. If you meet the designation, then the end user can then use a determination which allows them to accept digestate for use on their land. So the supplier needs to provide evidence that they comply to the designation, and then the end user can receive that material. So if you don't meet those requirements, and they're here, but I'm not going to talk to them because I've included them, so when you get the slide pack, you can look into the detail. If you choose not to meet those, there are alternate pathways. They're just not as easy as those two. So what does that mean for us, digestate at Yarra Valley Water? Conveniently, our second facility is located in the Yarra Valley region around a lot of farming and agriculture. So we are aiming before the end of the year to have a range of 3 to 5 commercial farm trials underway where we'll be applying digestate to a variety of land uses in the Yarra Valley region. Vineyards, quite obviously, pasture potentially, fruit and orchards, and potentially flowers are some of the things that we're looking at and partnering with currently to commence delivery on before the end of the year. So, enabling bioenergy locally, that's probably one of the big barriers that we've been facing, but in Victoria we're starting to find a way through. So as these barriers start to come down, hopefully other states can emulate what has happened in Victoria, hopefully not in the same time frame, but a little bit quicker, and that's another step closer that we are to creating circular economy with bioenergy. So thanks.
Okay, good afternoon everyone. My name's Brad Bailey. I work in the Hydrogen and Clean Energy branch of the New South Wales Government, and I also lead the renewable gas stream of Green Power. Firstly, I'd like to thank Shahana and the bioenergy team for having me on today to talk about the Green Power Renewable Gas Certification and the New South Wales Renewable Fuel Scheme. And also thank you for the haircut last night. Okay, all right, so for those who aren't aware, Green Power is a program that was set up in 1997. We're an accreditation program. We operate across the country, but it's operated by New South Wales Government on behalf of all states and territories. So we certify renewable energy products that retailers and certificate traders sell to make sure that customers get the green product that they pay for. So the aims of the program are to provide consumers with an option to choose a green product. We also aim to support new renewable electricity and gas production by making projects more financially viable and to ultimately decrease emissions from gas and electricity use. So until today, this has been working successfully over a long period of time for renewable electricity. And just a few years ago, we identified there's a gap in the market, and that's for a certification for renewable gases. So that's when we set about setting up this new renewable gas certification. So it's really important, I guess, initially to understand the value of certifications for renewable energy producers and also for consumers of that energy. So certifications like LGCs for renewable electricity or renewable gas guarantee of origins for gas, renewable gas, provide a way for consumers and businesses to verify that the energy that they purchase comes from renewable sources which are truly zero or low emission. For certifications like Green Power, strong environmental standards are set to achieve environmental outcomes which customers can make credible claims with. Certifications enable renewable energy generators and producers to extract that green premium for the product that they sell through certificate sales, providing them with an additional revenue stream to help with their project economics. Okay, so moving on to the certification itself. So this is a key summary slide, but essentially we launched last year. We're open for business. So we launched in August and we're open to applications from renewable gas producers as well as certificate traders. The objectives of the scheme are to support production of renewable gas in Australia and enable voluntary markets. Okay, so this is a voluntary scheme. It's a book and claim approach, so it applies that allows for that flexibility of producers to inject their gas into the grid and to sell their certificates to customers wherever they are in Australia. We're unlocking that green premium to help projects reach financial close and profitability after production. And we're targeting those hard to abate or hard to electrify processes in the commercial and industrial industries where they have those high heat processes which really they can't commercially electrify or get other fuel sources, or the technology just really isn't there yet. So our certificates as it currently stands aren't available to residential customers. We want to ensure that the limited amount of renewable gas that's currently and will be for the next few years in the system goes to the areas that really need it most, and that's to the hard to abate sectors. The eligible gas types are biomethane, biogas and renewable hydrogen. And we're currently looking to expand that in the future. So it's been great to sit here the last couple of days and listen to the outcries for certifications. So we're looking at renewable LPGs, renewable diesels, also SAF. So we'd be really keen to engage with some of the proponents out there who would like to discuss certifications in those areas. Okay, so how the certification works. So a renewable gas producer will come to Green Power and say, I've got a renewable gas project. It's either operating or it's due to be operating shortly. They can put in an application. If it looks like it's going to meet our eligibility criteria, we can tell them, yes, we'll give you a pre-approval, and then as you approach commissioning, we'll accredit the project. They will then be able to go onto our online certificate registry and register their gas and create RGGOs, or Renewable Gas Guarantee of Origin certificates, which they can then sell to a certificate trader, and then that certificate trader can retire those certificates on behalf of an end-use customer, which is a business. So that's it, very simple version of it. Next, this is dying. It's near the end of the conference. Here we go. Catching up. Sorry. Here we go. Okay. Now, to ensure that the Green Power certification is the gold standard when it comes to renewable gas certifications, we have set a really strict environmental and social criteria that projects have to meet to be eligible to participate in our scheme. So the first one, this is a very high level, all of the rules are on our website, but this at a very high level, all inputs to the production process have to be renewable. So renewable feedstocks and any energy or electricity used on site has to come from renewable sources. So either on-site renewable electricity or through Green Power OGC purchases. The emissions intensity of the production process has to be lower than the fossil natural gas equivalent. That's key to demonstrate decarbonisation. The project also has to demonstrate that they're using water responsibly, that they have limited environmental impacts, and also that they have engaged with the communities and have support and resolved any issues. Okay, here we go. Okay, as far as customer products go, as I mentioned, it's only available for commercial and industrial gas users. Retailers and certificate traders will be the sellers of the certificates to gas users. However, renewable gas project developers or producers can register as a certificate trader as well and retire their certificates on behalf of end users. The certificates can be coupled, and that means sold with a gas contract. Otherwise, they can be decoupled as well, so it's flexible. So you can be receiving your gas contract from someone else, but purchase certificates from another certificate trader. So there's good flexibility there. Now this is a big milestone for our certification, but also for the renewable gas industry in Australia. So really happy to announce that we've accredited our first project. Media releases went out this morning from both the New South Wales government and from Gemina. And I don't want to steal Brent Davis's thunder. He'll be presenting on this afternoon, so I'll go very high level about this project and let Brent dive into the details in terms of the insights and learnings from the project. But the project was commissioned in May last year. It's taking biogas from the Sydney Waters Malabar wastewater treatment plant, which is situated there in the picturesque fields of Sydney southeast. It's taking that biogas and upgrading it to biomethane, stripping out all the CO2 and other contaminants, and then injecting that biomethane directly into the Sydney natural gas grid. The capacity is around 100 terajoules. They're hoping to double that, or even more if they can get the available biogas feedstock from the wastewater. It's co-funded by Gemina and Arena. And as far as certificates go, Gemini has already gone in and logged 50 plus terajoules of gas that they've produced and injected into the grid, and that's available for when they have when we have signed up the certificate trader we are currently working with on their application. So in the next couple of months, we should see the full life cycle of our certificates from go to woe, where they've been created, transferred, traded, and then retired on behalf of an end user. All right. So how to participate? So please reach out to us if you are interested for more information or would like to make an application. That's our email address down there in blue. The green website there's lots of information. So there's the rules, there's the guidelines, there's application forms. So go in and check it out. We're also happy to provide renewable gas projects with letters of support or pre-approval, which they can take to investors to help with their financing options, or they can make them part of an application for grant funding, like with ARENA. So yes, please reach out. Now, final slide. Moving on now to the New South Wales Renewable Fuel Scheme. So this is different to the Green Power Scheme. This is a mandatory certificate scheme as opposed to voluntary, and this is state-based. So this is just for New South Wales, whereas Green Power was a national scheme. It's essentially, as I said, it's a mandatory certificate scheme that aims to create that financial incentive to increase green hydrogen production or renewable fuels production, but green hydrogen production initially in New South Wales. And it's currently designed, for this green hydrogen to set up the supply chains. How it will work is based on the amount of green hydrogen that a producer produces. They'll be able to create and then sell certificates to liable parties for each 1 gigajoule of hydrogen produced. Through certificate sales, that'll support their project and ultimately support industry growth supply chains and improve affordability, reliability and sustainability of green hydrogen in New South Wales. Liable parties under the RFS will be natural gas retailers and large gas users who currently source their gas directly from renewable gas producers. So these liable parties will need to buy and surrender certificates which are equivalent to their fair share or their share of production of the production target to meet their obligations or their financial liability. The liability for the scheme will commence in 2025, with targets gradually increasing up to 8 petajoules by 2030. So what's next for the RFS? Well, the New South Wales understands the importance of renewable fuels to the state, so we're currently considering the design options to expand the RFS into additional renewable fuels, which is a great thing. So we're also looking to expand the list of potentially liable parties. So a targeted consultation was recently held, and we're going out to do a public consultation in the middle of this year on the scheme expansion. And the final scheme rule for the green hydrogen is planned to be published later in 2024 as well, so keep an eye out for that. Okay, well, thanks for having me, and please come and find me if you have any questions on the certification or the RFS. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. It's fantastic to see the achievements that are being made in the industry, in particular certification, showing the advancement of New South Wales government. It's really impressive, so no, thank you for that. So for those that don't know me, I'm Jared Irving, the Senior Advisor of Renewable Gas Development at AGIG, and I've also been recently appointed a Chair of the Renewable Gas Alliance. So if you do have any questions or any ideas, happy to hear from you today about how we can enable the deployment of biomethane or biogas to biomethane, as well as other uses of biogas. So I had to have a real think about where this industry is at right now. Reflecting upon probably a year of change, there's been a significant shift. I would say a significant shift, and I believe Shahana, I was talking to yesterday, about how this industry is developed, not only from a perspective of the opportunity that it presents itself, but also the discussions that we're having at all levels of government. I think that being able to break down these barriers and able to understand what are the challenges to overcome is going to be really, really critical. So yes, we hear the echo of policy in this room, but it's in particular what type of policy. How do we target the policy? How do we make sure that it's palatable in the current environment? So I'm going to go through a couple of those barriers now, and I guess probably generate hopefully a couple of questions, and please feel free to jot them down and ask them during the question time. So for those that aren't familiar, we see biomethane playing a significant role in the circular economy. So for us, being able to share and help people understand the role that biomethane is going to play across all sectors is significant. So for us as a gas distribution business, it's a natural gas equivalent product. That means our existing commercial industrial customers can use the product like they use natural gas today. That provides significant advantages on other alternatives. It promotes the development of circular economy, waste reduction, the potential use of organics, like Stephanie explained, that's been done by Yarra Valley Water. It increases agricultural opportunities, the reduction in fossil fuel-based fertiliser products by utilising digestate products on land has a significant opportunity in itself. We see another alternative popping up, which is carbon dioxide. So we're at a significant shortage of carbon dioxide, which is quite a strange predicament to be in given the environment of net zero and our reduction in carbon emissions. The opportunity that biomethane presents is another source of that carbon dioxide. So we're able to take that product as we take biogas, we upgrade it into a cleaner primarily methane-based, and we take that carbon dioxide as potentially a byproduct. And then we end up with carbon neutral biomethane. Now, I'm not sure if a lot of SAF people are still here, but from a sustainable aviation fuels, there is a role to play as well. So biogenic CO2 is going to be progressed, in particular in Europe, quite readily to be applied to future sustainable aviation fuels. There's also methanation, which we see countries enabling legislation towards methanation like Japan. So synthetic methane is going to play a role, in particular in other countries around the world. And we see that being supported as a diverse energy-based system of the future. It isn't just one solution that we're going to be seeing, it is multiple. Now, I did have a question, can we enable it? So let's reflect upon who has. So the USA, again, via various incentive mechanisms and policy frameworks. You have Brazil, Europe, UK, India, China, Indonesia, all growing at an extremely rapid rate for biogas to biomethane. Now, they're all for various means, whether it be through decarbonisation or India through energy security, where they're diversifying their energy portfolio to make sure that in a future scenario that they're secure, their energy future is secure. Now a lot of this information is available through the International Energy Agency and the outlook for biogas to biomethane. The World Biogas Association also, in particular, if you want further details, in particular what country is doing what, is fantastic wealth of information. But how much are we looking at here? So we're looking at almost 5,000 petajoules by 2030 and 8,500 petajoules by 2040. Now that was the outlook for the biogas and biomethane by the International Energy Agency in 2020. We've seen significant shifts in the assessment of what is available, what can be converted, and how do we improve anaerobic digestion techniques to improve the volume of biogas being produced by digesters. So Europe has seen their outlooks change significantly over the past couple of years. But what we can look at in Europe in particular, it's quite interesting. You've got the European Biogas Association provides a map. Now this is only a portion of the map, but it provides a significant amount of detail on the growth of the sector. Now, interestingly, what you'll note, they're all very similar, they're all close, they all have the similar opportunities, but you'll see countries that haven't enabled biogas to biomethane in particular. Now you have currently growing it significantly, so 3.5 billion cubic metres, which is equivalent to 131 petajoules in 2021. That has grown astronomically over the past couple of years. So there is a compounded annual growth rate in Europe, around 7% they're targeting, and they're targeting for 2030, 1,300 petajoules of biogas to biomethane. Now, the great example that we can provide here is, what's the differences between these countries? Europe is implementing policies across the Renewable Energy Directive in particular, same policies but you have situations where countries are not developing the opportunity. So what we see here is a lag between the uptake in a policy and regulatory environment favourable to a biogas to biomethane, whether it be both policy or regulatory. So we can learn from this. We can analyse what did work, even not just from a policy perspective. There's a lot going on here. Now, what is going on? We have a raft of issues. So we've got investment. So we've got market signals, long-term offtakes. We also have difficulties securing project investments. Again, that may be associated somewhat to policy. We have the gas industry who is required to step up, support, and also provide a framework to be able to inject biomethane suitably into the grid. We have AS4564, which is a gas network-based standard for gas networks, natural gas specification. That's a gas specification that's owned by the gas industry. Now that's been changed internationally to allow the uptake of biomethane, and it hasn't been done yet for us. Policy and regulations. I mean, we're in an echo chamber here today and yesterday, but again, we can't just say this, it's just the one reason. We've got certification, which we've seen green power, so we've got it now. It's fantastic, but there is that scope 1 emission that industry is crying out for. They want a benefit for paying a premium. And then you have the bioenergy industry. So us being able to knowledge share, break down those barriers that are currently struggling or facing some of these projects. So we know that some projects are struggling with the gas network infrastructure and other issues that as an industry we can support. And that's where the RG8 comes in. And I think we've got a real role to play in terms of being able to enable this industry as well. Now, one of them is cost. Now, this article was in the AFR last week. Highly recommend a read. Not a single cent. No one wants to pay. Nobody wants to pay a green premium. No one wants to pay a green product. And that's what we see in the market. We see a small number of consumers, industrial customers that are willing to pay. But again, the policy frameworks are not there to incentivise businesses to move towards that. Where you see an uptake in a scope 1 emission potential where you can transfer that to an industrial user that is potentially facing safeguard mechanism requirements, there's an obligation to pay a premium. The gas industry, there's a lot of work to be done to be able to enable and fast track and smooth the connection requirements for biogas to biomethane. That's been done now. AGIG is prioritising it, and the APGA has developed or the Australian Pipeline and Gas Association has developed a working group to make sure that we smooth the connection process for biogas producers. Policy and regulations. I mean, we have one that worked. So we have the renewable energy target developed in 24 years old now. That was used to enable an industry, the renewable electricity industry, solar and wind. We have other issues associated, not just overarching. We have a regulatory problem with connections into our networks. There are challenges associated with the short-term trading market that never envisaged a distributed network connection associated with biogas to biomethane production. Similar challenges that were envisaged with the solar connections with your home. And then we have the potential for a recognition of a scope 1 emission transfer. Again, big changes. Certification, and I'll breeze through this one. The green power renewable gas certification, not pilot anymore, and we're trying to get that out. And I think it's fantastic that it's now a certification scheme that people can be confident in. And then there's a potential for product go. Is there going to be a biomethane go? We don't know at this point in time. But again, the Guarantee of Origin scheme has another potential opportunity to play there. So we have a policy and regulatory framework that we need to build. The gas industry needs to work to ensure that we make the process as easy as possible and simplify for gas producers, biogas producers. We need certification to build on. And as an industry, we need to push to develop and collaborate and understand what are these barriers and how do we break them down? How can we support each other as an industry? I see that as being the growth and also the significant reduction potential in cost of biomethane production. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Tracy Colley and I'm the Program Leader for Race for Business, which is part of the Race for 2030 CRC. Hopefully most of you heard about RACE. We presented last year on our opportunity assessment, which was launched last year. So this is a bit of an update. RACE stands for Reliable, Affordable, Clean Energy. And since our research program refresh, we have a research themes to do with, in business, to do with industrial digitalisation and value chain decarbonisation, which covers a whole range of different things. But what I would like to focus on today, in addition to the research that's currently underway, is some of the research ideas we'd like to develop with the industry. Really, we see our role as supporting the research needs of the biomethane industry. Pretty much anything that's going to delay or defer the uptake of biomethane at scale or at pace is potentially something we can support with our research partners. So last year we launched the opportunity assessment for biogas, which had our take on the numbers for the potential for biomethane. And it looked at, potentially there being 23% of the current market up to nearly 50% of the market once everybody's electrified everything everywhere. But the question is, what is the real number? And if you look at most of the feedstocks that we've identified there, they're really different variations on waste. And the critical issue really, as other speakers have alluded to, is we're in a transition stage from seeing waste as a waste to seeing it as a secondary resource, and designing systems for managing individual waste versus looking at the circular economy benefit of how can we optimise the biogas and biomethane production from those available resources. And particularly with those wastes there, it's interesting to consider, we heard earlier this morning about the indirect land use change is 1/3 of the carbon footprint of SAF derived from canola. In theory, as most of these are waste products, they should not have anywhere near that sort of indirect land use change burden. But that whole issue of understanding the full life cycle impacts of biomethane from different feedstocks, and particularly using it for different end uses, is something that's still an open question here in Australia. So these are some of the projects which we both have completed and have underway. We did a project with Sydney Water where we looked at thermal hydrolysis and wet air oxidation of their activated sludge or digestate. And the thermal hydrolysis can actually increase biogas production by 10%. But unfortunately, the most economic option was the business as usual scenario, which basically indicates with current economic signals, most wastewater treatment companies would need to apply for capital support to try and implement those sorts of projects. We looked at a project with the sugar industry in Queensland, and it was a co-digestion project, so it looked at matching up a carbon-rich stream with a nutrient-rich stream, and it identified the potential for individual mills to contribute if we're optimising both bagasse and also mill mud, so some of their other what are currently waste products. We also had another project with Sydney Water where we looked at diverting urban organic waste from landfill or composting to existing anaerobic digesters. And in theory, that can provide a substantial little increment on gas available from a theoretical point of view. And the idea is that you can look at optimising the use of existing ADs that currently have a bit of excess capacity. And then, but obviously the question remains, is that the best option? Are there then problems with using the digestate given contamination issues in that system? Is it actually better from a circular economy and whole of life cycle perspective to actually look at segregating those and treating them separately, which is what Yarra Valley Water have done in their operation. So still lots of questions. And we have a current project which with the red meat industry that's being done by Griffith Uni once again. And it's look at anaerobically co-digesting some of their wet waste, so not their wastewater, they've already got a good handle on that, but it's using paunch manure, DAF sludge, and looking at co-digesting that with a range of different sources that are higher in carbon to try and balance the nutrient and carbon ratios, to try and optimise the biogas production from individual sites. And really the idea is for that to be used as a focal point for a regional area to try and look at local decarbonisation. So using those meat processing plants as hub for biomethane development in that local area. We're also looking at projects that look at potentially increasing the biogas production from existing wastewater treatment facilities, so optimising production by looking at reducing contaminants like ammonia. So for example, landfill leachate, which quite often ends up in wastewater treatment plants, can actually inhibit biomethane production in wastewater treatment plants. So the idea is to do upfront treatment of that to try and maximise the biogas production once again, and also looking at what are the various options available for upgrading biogas streams to biomethane, and looking at additional benefits of reducing energy consumption in the plant so that their parasitic use in plant is less, and then hopefully they have more either biogas to export, biomethane to export, or more electricity export to the grid. And the issue really is thinking about, biomethane, what is the best use for biomethane as a feedstock, and I've just really highlighted here, there are a number of industry sectors that have high temperature heat which aren't going to be able to electrify, as well as industries that use methane as a feedstock that also aren't going to be able to diversify. So there's still questions about what is the best use for different biomethane feedstocks, and particularly how that varies by location depending on proximity to gas networks and the like. So we've already had discussion from Yarra Valley Water about the issue with digestate, and obviously Victoria is leading the way there in terms of making sure that we can make the absolute most of the opportunity provided by particularly source segregated anaerobic digestion that doesn't have contamination coming in. So if it's not being spontaneously generated in the AD, then it's not going to be in the digestate either. This, in the opportunity assessment, was identified as the biggest potential financial benefit to the industry. And it can really be 40% of the revenue or a cost, depending on the regulations. So it's part of supporting the biomethane industry is ensuring that there's equitable treatment and recognition of the full life cycle value of digestate. Obviously, there's quite a bit of work that needs to be done on looking at the full life cycle value of digestate and how much that can offset, for example, fossil fertiliser use in different applications. And we're definitely looking at how we can support the industry to develop a project to look at that moving forward. And I guess the particular issue is that we have various state government agencies as our current members. So there's an opportunity for the industry and government to come together to co-design a project to identify the research needs and for us to match that up with our research partners. And so we can basically have a consensus-based research project that's developed. So hopefully once the results are through, it means that we can basically have agreement on that. So always looking for how we can support the industry. And the other issue, I guess, is behind the meter type applications versus upgrading and grid injection. Obviously, if you're near a gas network, there's an potential incentive to upgrade and grid inject. But we also, in looking at feedstock availability, optimising the biomethane production, we also want to look at how we can support the industry as a whole, not just the industry that's close to networks. So we've already been through this, so I won't go over it, just to point out that the Australian GO scheme was designed in accordance with the IPHE V1, which was just for hydrogen. The current version, which is V3, actually does include biomethane. So at the moment, the federal GO scheme is not actually consistent with the IPHE. Thankfully, we have the Green Power people who've done a wonderful job in the developing the renewable gas certification pilot. All sorts of options we can look at in terms of barriers, other alternatives, and basically we're responsive to the industry needs. So if you have a research question, we are happy to look at supporting you in investigating that question, and particularly the balance between the carrots and the sticks. We've already touched on this, so I'll just breeze over it. Bio-CO2, that's another potential co-product from biomethane. At the moment, we import all our CO2. We'd love to support the industry in how we get an Australian bio-CO2 industry happening. Similarly, bio-CNG, obviously in the US, RNG in transport is a big option, and in some locations that are not adjacent to a pipeline network, that might also be a great option for Australia. Very happy to work with industry on how we can support on that. And yeah, so we've got other projects that sort of relate to it as well. 24/7 True Zero is about time matching renewables, renewable electricity consumption and generation, which will be relevant for hydrogen moving forward, but also looking at the opportunities available in the electricity market, particularly to do with the solar soak period. So that's it from me. Happy to take questions in the panel discussion.
Good afternoon. So my name is Peter Hankey from Australian Renewable Energy Agency, ARENA. I imagine most people in this room will know about ARENA, but I'll just give you a very quick overview for those who may not be so familiar. So ARENA was formed getting on for nearly 12 years ago now, back in July 2012. And as it says there, our purpose is to support global transition to net zero emissions by accelerating the pace of pre-commercial innovation to the benefit of Australia. And we do that by providing grant funding, effectively, essentially for a variety of projects, run through a number of different programs, and I'll cover some of those this afternoon that are relevant to this group. But again, just to continue the quick overview, it's a bit of a snapshot, it's a busy slide, but I guess the key numbers there, we've invested something like almost 2.5 billion, just under 2.5 billion to date, across those 11 or 12 years to date. 687 projects with a total value of about 10.8 billion, so that's ARENA funding plus private funding put together. So again, a leverage of about 1 to 3. I think that's something similar to what the CEFC mentioned this morning in the work that they do. So we're getting a similar kind of thing. And you can see we're scattered across Australia, projects scattered right the way around the country and invested across a whole range of different technologies. So what I wanted to talk to you about this afternoon was just a couple of programs we're running at the moment, which are focused around industrial decarbonisation. So it fits in with the renewable natural gas theme or biomethane theme that we're talking about. And we've got 2 programs that are focused in this space at the moment. And both of them, they're very, very similar programs, and I'll explain the minor differences in a minute. But effectively, they're looking to support industrial facilities in Australia to reduce emissions in line with our long-term emission reduction goals. We're looking to improve technology readiness and commercial readiness of renewable energy, energy efficiency and electrification technologies that will result in significant Scope 1 reductions, Scope 1 and or Scope 2 reductions at those facilities. So we're not looking for incremental change, we're looking for transformational change. We encourage technology demonstration, collaboration, and a really important part of everything ARENA does is to encourage knowledge sharing. From all of our projects, knowledge sharing is a really important part. We consider that our return on investment. We actually obviously don't get the money back, it's grant money, but we do share knowledge with the industry. A lot of people are concerned that that means we're going to be giving away secrets, commercial in confidence information. That's not what it's about. What we do is share the learnings so that the industry becomes aware of where technologies have worked, where their opportunities exist, what barriers might have been overcome, and perhaps some pitfalls that were encountered so that can be avoided next time around. And importantly, we're also looking to support the upskilling of the industrial workforce. This is a major undertaking to decarbonise industry across the country, and there's a large upskilling going to be required to support that. So the programs that we're operating are shown here. They're very, very similar, as I mentioned. So the first one is under the Powering the Regions Fund, which was announced by the government last year, and it's called the Industrial Transformation Stream, or ITS for short. And the second one we've labelled the National Industrial Transformation Program. First one 400 million, second one 40 million. The reason for the difference there, I won't go into the background as to how the monies came through, but essentially program one is where we see most of the applications coming through, and the second one is kind of a bit of a mop-up program. Both of them targeting industrial facilities. The first one targeting specifically regional NGA reporting facilities, whereas the second one is not constrained to regional or NGA reporting facilities, so slight difference there. Both of them focused around Scope 1, Scope 2 emissions, as I mentioned, and supporting everything from feasibility and feed studies right the way through to implementation. So you can do either or both. We're flexible as to how that's being undertaken. So some of the example projects there, things like renewable energy for process heat, obviously the sort of topic we've been talking about today, as well as energy efficiency and electrification and other technologies to achieve those outcomes. Little bit different structure for the two programs. Program one, the ITS, is being rolled out in terms of rounds. So we've got round one was launched just before Christmas, and so it operates for this current for this calendar year, 2024. $150 million out of the 400 has been allocated to that round one. And it's got two specific focus areas, one being process heat, so again, very pertinent to what we're talking about, and the second one being off-road transport, so think mining haul trucks and stuff like that. So relevant to biodiesel and other technologies. The second one doesn't have those specific focus areas, and it's just an open until funds exhausted type of program. In terms of the way the programs operate, they've got a two-stage application process. It's an expression of interest followed by a full application. We have a very open, communicative, collaborative kind of way that we operate many of our programs, these ones included. So we work very closely with applicants. It's not a fill in the form and send it off and sit back and wait to hear what happens. We work with the applicant on the way through to get an application in a form that we feel is going to give it the best shot at success. There's an option for projects to be staged up, so that there might be, say, a feasibility or a feed study, which is required to then roll through into the implementation phase, so we can structure it that way. And we do look for at least matched funding. That's not a default number. In all of ARENA's programs, we will go up to match funding, but we will look at every project on a case-by-case basis to say what's the minimum grant size required to actually make this make sense for the applicant. A couple of bioenergy related FAQs. So biomass, bioenergy are eligible renewable sources under both the programs. That can be on-site bioenergy or off-site, as we've heard about through the Green Power type scheme or the Go type scheme when that comes through, also eligible. Things that are not eligible over on the right-hand side, generic biomethane to the grid type projects are not something that would be supported under these programs, because these programs are specifically designed to support the end user. So we want to see a very close link between the generation of the biomethane, say, and who's going to be using it. So we're not against a biomethane to grid project, we just need to understand what the linkage is, who's going to be using that, who's the off-taker effectively, and how does that contractual relationship work. We're not funding incineration of non-putrescible wastes, so incineration type stuff. And these programs are not supporting SAF because we've got a separate program dealing with SAF specifically. Very quickly, because I know we're running out of time, as I said, two-stage application process. I think the key message to take away from here is if you want to engage with ARENA around any of our non-competitive programs, so this is a non-competitive program, really encourage you to engage with us up front. I'll give you a email address at the end where you can make contact, and really the preferred way of dealing with us is to make contact, let us know what it is you're thinking about. We often ask you for a short description of what your project is so that we can get something in writing, have a bit of a look at it and understand what it is, and then we will arrange a call and we will start to work with you as you put your materials together and take you through the process. And that process looks a bit like this. It goes to an expression of interest application that gets assessed by our independent assessment panel, and then subject to their recommendation, you'd be invited back to do a full application. Again, that goes to the panel, and hopefully that gets us a successful outcome as well. And then it goes for internal approval either through the board or the CEO, just depending on the level of funding required. And then we have a contract execution process at the end of that. Eligibility criteria, I won't go through these, but these are a must tick. They're pretty standard and straightforward. There shouldn't be any significant hold-ups for most people to address all of that. And then the merit criteria this is where you demonstrate why your project is particularly meritorious and should be considered for funding. And it's against those 5 categories there. So again, in the interest of time, I won't go through those in detail. Just where to go for further information, if you go to our website, www.arena.gov.au, you'll find there's a tab there called Funding, and if you just click on that, you will find all of ARENA's programs, including the 2 that I've just spoken about there. And you can also make some inquiries, as I mentioned, through industrial transformation at arena.gov.au, and one of the team will respond to that. And that's it, I think. Time for questions.
Thank you, Peter. We have 15 minutes for questions, so questions from the floor. Okay.
Hello, my question's for Peter. I'm Richard Gorman. I'm over here, Peter. So we have we're a farming company, but we've decided to diversify into bioenergy. So we have a project coordinated by the Queensland Government. With your round 1, would you consider on-road transport, not just off-road transport?
Not under these programs. We do have other programs that are dealing with road transport. That's why they're excluded from this. We just didn't want to duplicate coverage of that sector.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? There's one right here. Are the mics working there?
I think so.
Okay.
Yes.
This is a question for Brad. I'm John Burnett from EDL. You said you need to have a lower CI score than fossil natural gas. How do the certificates benefit a product that has a low CI score versus one with a higher CI score?
That's right. Yeah, no, good question. Right now, in terms of the value of the certificates, that'll be through direct bilateral contracts between the end user and a certificate trader. So not all certificates will trade at the same value. We won't have visibility of that. So that emissions of the production process essentially will be the scope 3 of the end user, right? So right now they don't need to actually report on that, but in the future it's likely that that's going to happen. So that'll become more and more important. So with our certificates, whether it's renewable hydrogen or biogas or biomethane, there will be premiums traded based on the type of gas, but then there's the emissions intensity of that production process as well, or the scope 3, which will also provide another layer to that premium that some are willing to pay. So a zero or very low emission production process gas, may fetch a higher price than a higher emissions. Yep.
This one here from Sean.
Just getting in early, I've been told that's okay. Alex Grant from Arena. One for the whole panel, and Brad, maybe zero on you. The willingness to pay element, and I guess the customer base, who's driving this? So if you get the regulations right, if you get the supply right, who are going to be these people who start to eat into the green premium, and how burgeoning is that demand?
Yeah, so great question. So right now, Jared touched on it, where there isn't recognition for renewable fuels certificates in Australia, market-based accounting. So we are having conversations with large gas users, and even though that they can't say that they are reducing their emissions with renewable gas certificates if they were to purchase them, they are still wanting to purchase the certificates to demonstrate that they're a sustainable organisation and that they're doing everything they can to be a sustainable operator. So they will be able to say, I am matching my fossil gas use with green power accredited low emission renewable gas certificates, but they won't be able to claim an emissions reduction yet. So that's why we're advocating to Engers and Climate Active and whatnot for it to be included in Safeguard and other mechanisms for emissions reductions of these types of certificates. And then, it's been widely conveyed this last 2 days, this is imperative to drive renewable gas, renewable fuels production in Australia. So,
Just from who actually is going to pay for it, what we actually see in the market right now is, so internationally you have a similar situation where under the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, you inject biomethane into the network and it becomes natural gas. So you aren't getting the Scope 1 emission recognition internationally in some countries, depending on how they regulate. Now, what we do see though is countries like or businesses with European-based entities that have understood that mechanism for quite some time, where they are buying a certificate that matches their usage under those mechanisms. So what we do see is businesses that are used to that are quite comfortable with paying that premium, but again, we see that as finite. So we see the market as having a finite. There's only so many people that are willing to pay that premium and what that premium looks like. Now, as we see the potential for there to be any additional benefits like that Scope 1, I think those certificate prices are going to go up quite significantly. But again, you have businesses right now, in particular under the Safeguard mechanism, where you can procure an ACCU, let's say at the cap price, for instance, at $75 a tonne. That's equivalent to $3.86 a gigajoule. Now, if we want to make a market, that's not going to make a market. that's not recognising the additional benefits that come from biomethane or the market that it sets up. So there has to be some additional recognition, and I think that's really the next piece of the puzzle that adds that value.
Sean. Excuse me, Sean Tan from EGRT. So you've talked about domestic kind of building up the deployment of biomethane. I'd just like to ask the panel if you've got any views on how you would build up that demand, or what type of policy might build up that demand. Excuse me. And as a kind of a second and related question as well, whether you see the role of biomethane in homes and households as being part of that solution.
I'll have a crack. Not so much from a policy perspective, but just from from the applicants that we see looking to decarbonise industrial processes. Overwhelmingly, that's because of corporate drivers, decarbonisation drivers, for exactly the reason that's been talked about all day. Process emissions from fossil fuel constitutes a large part of a corporate's footprint in many cases. Decarbonising electricity is, let's say, relatively easy. We know, at least we know what needs to be done. It's not a simple technical task, but we know what needs to be done. It's getting done, and you can buy green power. Gas has been a much more difficult, and coal for that matter, much more difficult fuel to decarbonise. And so the applicants we see are trying to tackle that issue specifically to meet internal drivers and stakeholder needs.
So I think I'll answer quickly on the first question. I guess a big role in enabling is what ARENA's doing currently. There's also the work that Sustainability Victoria did as part of their bioenergy fund, working on biogas to biomethane. So you've got, initially prior to this policy, there's got to be some kind of capital support as part of that initial investment, whether it be DevEx funding, development funding, into the capital delivery. Now we're seeing that happening now with the Queensland Bioenergy Fund. That is that first step, and then you've got schemes such as the Renewable Fuel Scheme within New South Wales that then has that tariff-based opportunity on top. So again, that's, you're slowly seeing that policy shift. From a question 2, which is probably a little bit more associated with gas networks, we see the way gas networks have been distributed and set up that to support the existing commercial businesses that are on those networks that do require biomethane or another alternative renewable gas, we see residential users are going to play a role for some time and quite a long time. It's going to be hard to decarbonise. We're seeing that at the moment. It's going to be a long journey. We're seeing the challenges at the moment across Victoria and across Queensland as part of our decarbonisation of our electricity sectors. It's a challenging time, and we see it playing a role. And if we can decarbonise as fast as we can with biomethane, and we can get it into people's homes as well as commercial and industry at the same time, then I think it's a fantastic opportunity to try.
Go ahead.
Manfred Beyer from Hydroflux. I've got a question in regards to digestate and rules for application. So mainly, initially maybe to Stephanie, but also to other panel members, if you can add to that. If I understand the latest EPA Victoria regulations correctly, it would mean that for low risk digestate or digestate that comes from a low risk source, it would require to be held at 55 degrees for a number of hours, for high risk to be both digested at 55 degrees and then pasteurized at 70 degrees. First, do I understand that correctly? Is that what you are facing? Which would, if that is correct, it would mean you cannot digest at 37 to 40 degrees. You would have to have a high temperature digesters for all of those projects. And the second question is there a potential or an avenue for Australia to apply a more risk-based approach where, say, your digestate can be used for this kind of use but can't be in direct food contact? Do we see such an avenue in the future?
Yeah, so when the initial draft policy went out, it was very much along those lines. It was very prescriptive in the pasteurisation requirement. There was significant industry feedback, I think nationally, on the Victorian digestate regulation, which we're quite grateful for. I think EPA Victoria had a little bit of tunnel vision, given that we were the only operating facility in Victoria. To them, that was almost that, and sort of the Melbourne water biosolids, that was sort of almost it for them. What they ended up getting back was a very informed feedback piece from operators and potential operators, future operators, I should say, all around Australia. The pasteurisation was the first one to get hit real hard. So it was initially, as you said, just a straight pasteurisation requirement, pre-feed or post-feed, or post-digestion. The slide that I had, so I think when that information goes out, has it in a little bit more detail. There is now in options. There's a few options on how to comply to the pasteurisation requirement. One is a straight, whatever it is, 70 degrees, 1 hour, bang, hit. The other one is in the retention time and temperature within your AD, and then the third is a outcomes-based, evidence-based compliance. So there are now some options on the pasteurisation requirement. For example, at our facility number 1, we do have a pasteurisation unit post-digestion. So once we're finished digestion, the digestate moves out of the digesters, it goes into pasteurisation for 1 hour, and then it moves into our residual tank. Tick, easy tick on that top option. Our second facility will have the second option, the third option, which is an outcomes-based. Through the processing that we will do for the digestate afterwards, we will have a heat and retention time that will achieve pasteurisation, but we will demonstrate it through monitoring program post the treatment. So even us, we're using 2 options there already within that regulation. That flexibility was hugely appreciated. Coming back and seeing EPA Victoria actually pick that up and listen. The second part of feedback that came back, again, comes back to this low, high-risk feedstock. If you're pasteurising, what does it matter? That's what we're trying to achieve, right? So there is still some commentary on high risk and low risk, but there are more options to demonstrate your compliance. The original draft document that floated around for a little while included really heavy restrictions on an end user. So along with some things that should be there, monitoring programs, etc. Monitoring frequencies were really high, and the cost in establishing what was being prescribed was quite high. The feedback that went back there was, you just instated general environmental duty in your regulations. Why are you being so prescriptive if you've got a broad regulation now that you can use to regulate the performance of someone using digestate on a farm? So that was actually picked up by EPA as well. They removed the end user requirements, which is why you have that second step that allows someone to receive the digestate, and you just need to demonstrate that the environmental general duty is being followed and you're not impacting the environment. So again, you have flexibility on how you demonstrate that. There's various other regulation mechanisms that already exist that you can lean on. Fertiliser use regulation, general farming regulation. There is a reference to PAS 110 and to the UK RAP as examples of what best practice looks like, but there is flexibility now in how you demonstrate. So that means that the application options are far more broad. You just need to make sure that you're doing the adequate research and controls in place for where you're with your end user to ensure that everyone's covering their obligations and that you're having a positive impact and you're not risking the environment. So it's not perfect, but we think it's a good starting point, and we will start to test that later this year and no doubt identify those roadblocks and go back to EPA on that as we go along the journey.
Thank you. We have time for one more question.
Last question.
Go for it, yeah.
Hi, my name is Tats Kato from Sojitz. Thank you for a great presentation. I have a question for Tracy. So I've led the report for Race for 2030 CRC anaerobic digestion report, and report says that biogas or biogas upgrading project had potential revenue stream for, of course, heat, electricity, digestate, LGC, and renewable gas certificate, but also mentioned ACCUs. And then I understand that currently majority of the ACCUs is created by like landfill gas, but also like there are many methodologies to create ACCUs, right? So can you, with respect to anaerobic digestion, is there any other key methodologies such as like animal effluent management methods? And I want to, because in ACCUs there is already established, a market, and then Sojitz itself is like safeguard facilities, and after safeguard mechanism reform, there is a demand. So I want to understand the potential for ACCUs creation through anaerobic digestion projects. Thank you.
Sure, thanks very much for that. But I think I might actually redirect the question. Bioenergy Australia has the Renewable Gas Alliance, and they have various streams of work that they're working on in that. And so maybe, Jared, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so there's been a change in the approach in the way we look at carbon credits. So there's a lot happening. There was the CCA review into NGAs that's just been completed. There's a lot of work being done on carbon credits across a whole breadth of industries. You're looking at landfill all the way to biomethane. Now, there was industry-led methodologies. Now, those have all come down. There's a new process that's been integrated where they look at developing specific carbon crediting across industry-led developments. So it is potentially something that we look at, and it has been brought up that as part of our industry, is there an industry-led method that we look at in particular as part of the different types of aggregation, wastewater, organics, that we look at potentially targeting carbon crediting for those specific processes. So it's definitely something we're looking at, but there are changes and shifts happening at the moment, and highly recommend reading the CCA report into the NGAs 5-year review. So it's only completed every 5 years. It's quite detailed. There's about 27 recommendations that then goes into for review, and then they'll decide what they potentially legislate as part of that process. So I think that comes out in the next 3 months. So there is progress happening, and there is a potential right now for an industry-led method as well.
Just to add, our second facility is registered and eligible for ACCUs. I couldn't tell you exactly, but it'll be the portion, obviously, that's diverted from landfill, so not our full stream liquids, for example, are not landfill diversion, but out of our solid organics. So there is progress. Number 1 didn't have any, number 2 has some.
Excellent. I think that will bring this session to a close, and please join me in thanking our speakers. But I might leave by taking us first to Stephanie's opening remarks, which is everyone is doing it except us. So hopefully in the next couple of years, we've got this industry happening in scale. We have lots of policy, the New South Wales, the ARENA funding, and it's we need private investment to lean in and make it happen. All right, thank you. Enjoy. You have afternoon tea now?